Implats mine now at Rasimoni operation. Bring in Labour analyst Andrew Levy. Andrew, very good evening to you. Good to have your time. So the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Mineral Resources saying they are concerned about what appears at least to be an emerging trend where these sit-ins are happening at mines in the country this year. We've certainly reported on it more, but is it necessarily a new strategy by workers, a new means of protest in this country?
No, I don't think it is at all. And in reality, it's a very, very old technique. It's called a sit-in. The fact that this is happening, several thousand feet underground makes it very little different to the occupation of a factory premises. And it poses severe difficulties for the organizing workers or union or whomever it may be, because, of course, when you have 2,000 people, you can almost be certain that the majority of them don't particularly want to be there. So the situation is a tense one, but it is no different in essence to any wildcat strike. Now, if we look at the circumstances, it's a lot easier to keep 2,000 people hostage underground, if that's what you want to do, in a mine, because the means of exit are limited. People don't have freedom to come and go. The fact that the mine has opened up some additional escape routes, so to speak, and people are leaving is indicative of that. But at the end of the day, it becomes a safety concern for the mine, and of course it becomes increasingly unpleasant for the workers who are having difficulty with eating, with sleeping, with basic sanitary functions, with food. So I think it is probably going to peter out reasonably soon. Again, somewhat of an intractable one at this stage. But if you were to say to me, has there been an increase in wildcat industrial action, unprocedural strikes this year, I would say yes, there has. Right. Has it been seen in the mining industry? Yes, it has. But I don't think this is anything other than industrial action, just wearing a slightly different coat.
How effective a means of protest do you think this is? Because if it's being duplicated at several operations in multiple provinces, yes, at different times, but there's clearly been more than 2 or 3, in fact, of these sit-ins now in the last while, especially in the second half of the year. Does that suggest that workers are realizing that it works, or at least that it gets them the attention that they want from the powers that be?
Look, it may well be that workers are feeling it, but in reality, I think the response would be much the same if it were just an ordinary stoppage. In reality, the fact that they choose to sit in underground somewhat makes it easier for management. They don't have to look after them. They don't have a great risk of intimidation or destruction of property at the entrance to the mine. And frankly, all they need to do is to sit and wait. I think if we look back at the first one and the big one, and that was the Gold One, and that was about inter-union rivalry between AMCU and NUM, it was, in a manner of speaking, effective, but I don't think it was any more effective than it would have been had it been normal industrial action. So are we concerned about the rise of industrial action? Most certainly. Is this kind of industrial action inherently risky and dangerous? Yes, it is, because of the environment. But I think that whether it's going to be more effective is something that I would doubt.
You say it makes it easier if the workers are part of a sit-in underground, perhaps for the employers. But as we're seeing now at Implats, one of the things that happens is that operations have to stop. How much does that put pressure on the employer to, at the very least, try to negotiate, to try and meet the demands?
Well, I would say I would say 2 things here. The first is that, in terms of the pressure on the employer, obviously, if production is stopped, there is a great pressure on the employer. And at a time now where the mineral price, well, platinum price particularly, the basket price is low, that really is a matter of some concern, and it's going to cast a long shadow. So this is not good news. But of course, if there were any other form of wildcat strike action, production would probably cease, with the added rider that where you're working shifts and the next shift tries to come on, then the shift that started the strike will ensure that they don't. And that's where the risk of violence and intimidation occurs. Here, at least, you're not going to have the shift changeover circumstance. So, once again, I think, yes, it is a matter of concern. And, of course, we can't lose sight of the additional safety concerns. And we know that mining is dangerous, and we know that in this particular mining group there was an awful disaster some months ago where a cage fell down and I think 17 workers were killed. So clearly that is a more difficult situation. But I think that management are not going to try and force the issue and force them out, because then there will be clashes. The thing will spiral out of control, and it will become infinitely worse and infinitely more dangerous.
What does it say, though, Andrew, about the state of the industry overall, that we're seeing then workers resorting to wildcat action? And I'm curious about it on two levels, about what it says about the relationship between labor and the employer, but also workers and trade unions, be it ones that they're members of or rival unions, and how that relationship is perhaps changing, if we can call it that.
I think it's a very good question. The first thing is, to answer your first question, there has been a very unfortunate rise in strike action this year, and particularly in wildcat strike action. And that infers and means that our labor relations are really in a very negative space. They are dysfunctional, not to put too strong a term on it. Now, we can all speculate as to the reasons why, but I think that one of the reasons, too, is the frustration with unions and what unions are delivering. Now, I very much doubt that something like this has been organized, sanctioned, or is something that the union is sponsoring or urging, because it would be not only completely irresponsible of them, but it would create a very dangerous situation. Now, I would think that the unions are probably as keen to get their members out, or the employees out, as many of the employees themselves probably are. But one of the difficulties, to come back to your first question, is that there is a great deal of inter-union competition going on right now. I mean, we think of AMCU and NUM typically in this industry, but that position is mirrored all over the various sectors, where unions who used to be in the same stable are now at odds with one another, and there are many sort of one-off localized unions, all aiming for a membership which is dwindling with the loss of jobs and the unemployment. So there are more and more people fighting for a smaller and smaller slice of the pie, and of course it's their income that's on the line. So these disputes become very bitter, and management very often gets caught in the middle. But all in all, it really is time that we had some kind of national effort to try and reset our labor relations. They really should not continue on this basis.
And who should lead that national conversation? Would it be government? And a second question I want to add on to that before we're out of time is around management. Yesterday, when we spoke to Implats on the show here, they were already talking about the sort of tough action that they're going to take against anyone who may be leading these sit-ins, which some have characterized as hostage situations. And I wonder if that approach is effective, given the sensitivity sometimes of what is unfolding.
I don't wish to criticize the company. There are many features of this which I don't have knowledge of, but I would not see it as analogous to a hostage situation. I think to some extent that might be putting too sharp a point on it. I would prefer to see it as unlawful industrial action. And I don't necessarily believe that unless they have hard evidence to show that there was intimidation, there was victimization, that people were compelled to do this, I don't know that there is anything to be gained by making martyrs. It's probably going to just make the thing drag on a lot longer. And with respect to the first part of the question, who should be leading this? Well, it should be government, but I'm not sure that government is leading much at this stage. But I would make one other observation, and that is that typically in South Africa and in many other countries in the world, there's a close correlation between the electoral cycle and industrial action. So as we move into an electoral year, I would expect to see more industrial action here. And that's, of course, because Labour is an important political component. All governments want the support of the Labour vote. And the unions are not slow in making demands and saying, well, if you want us to recommend that we support you, we want this, that, and the other, even though a lot of these deals are done behind closed doors. So I think that's going to happen anyway. But, would I see government doing anything constructive or positive in a year in which the first 6 months are going to be focused around the election? Frankly, no. I think their eyes are going to be on other things.
Andrew Levy, good to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time tonight.